This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, shocking, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I am Steve Gould. Thank you for joining us. This is episode number 63. In this episode, I'm going to interview retired NYPD Sergeant Christopher Strom. Christopher was part of the intelligence division at NYPD, which I don't know too much about, but I've heard pretty cool things. And besides that, after his career with NYPD, he went ahead and went over to Iraq to battle a lethal insurgency that was happening there with a group of retired special forces and law enforcement experts called the Phoenix Team. So that right there just sounds like some insane movie plot stuff. So when Bill Cannon, past guest, recommended him, I read up on him a little bit and I said, 1 billion % I want to have this guy on. He's got a book. It's called Brooklyn to Baghdad. And I just can't wait to get his stories because he's got, he's going to have stories from 2 different continents and it's going to be nuts. So let me go ahead and dial him in.
Are you there, Steve?
Christopher Strom, welcome to Things Police See, my brother.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm happy to have you, man. I had you came highly recommended by Bill Cannon, past guest on the show here.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, Bill's a sweetheart. He's a great guy. He really, really is a great guy.
Great guy. Yeah, he said we were about to hang up, and he's like, you know what? You got to have this guy, Christopher Strom. Come on, he's a really great guest, and he's done all these things. And I got to tell you, you got one of those names. You Google it, and you go, yes, I need to have this guy on because your career is. It's like you did this time with NYPD as a sergeant in the intelligence division, and then as if you burnt out your adrenal glands. You got on a plane and went to Iraq to battle insurgency. So that to me is like stuff movies are based on, you know?
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Hopefully someday that might happen. Who knows? That'd be fantastic. That'd be good for my podcast too. Probably up the downloads. It'd be good all around. Yes, sir. Yes,
absolutely. Sir. So Christopher, typically on the show, you know, I asked, I kind of have like a boilerplate questions I ask that people like to hear answers to. And obviously you have a whole nother thing going on here with the Iraq stuff. So can you just give us a little, just a brief synopsis of your NYPD, like the years you did, ranks, all that?
Yeah, I joined the NYPD in 1987, did my field training in Brooklyn, in Coney Island. After that, I went to Queens, and I was in Queens for I think about 12 years, almost 12 years. And I did patrol for the first 6 years, and then I did anti-crime for 2 years. Got involved in a shooting, and they laterally promoted me to a street crime unit, which was a robbery unit within the borough of Queens. And I did that for 4 years, and then I got promoted to sergeant. Went back to Brooklyn, worked in a great precinct, the 7-6 precinct, right by the Brooklyn Bridge and the Battery Tunnel and the East River. Those were like the primary borders.
Very cool.
And then I did narcotics while I was in the precinct. And then 9/11 happened and I got pulled into the intelligence division. I did that for the remainder of my career. And that was about 5.5, almost 6 years. And it was a great together, great people. I was really fortunate to have a lot of smart people, smarter than me, surrounding me. And together, we locked up a lot of bad people and had a great time.
Man, that's a great career, man. You know, it's funny. A few years back, I heard of the NYPD having this intelligence division, and then I heard that they had like agents overseas, kind of infiltrating mosques and stuff. And I was like, what? That sounds crazy to me. But when you look at the big picture, NYPD's it's the largest police department in the country, and they have a lot of targets that could be affected. So it kind of makes sense. I mean, why wouldn't you guys be doing that stuff?
Well, let me just tell you, for you and for your audience, that people who might be less familiar with the NYPD, it's almost like a small army unto itself. There's probably 35,000 uniform police officers, give or take. There's probably a lot less now with all that's going on because there's kind of like a mass exodus.
Right.
But within the intelligence division, when I was there was 1,000 strong, and the NYPD intelligence division is actually now currently the repository and Google of all human intelligence, period, in law enforcement. Anybody wants to talk to me about that or debate that with me, I'm happy to have that conversation. But that's the reality of the amount of work that goes on, and some of the programs that are within the intelligence division. If people really knew what went on a daily basis, they'd probably fall out of their chair.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, geez, is it larger than the Coast Guard? 35,000? It might be.
I'm not, it's a good question. I'm not sure. I know that the work that they do is incredible, and I know that the work that is done overseas. In fact, there's an NYPD detective, sometimes two, sometimes at least one sergeant in every major city in Europe, Asia, the Middle East. I mean, pick a major city, and there is an NYPD officer there. And the reason for that is we got caught blindsided twice. And I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty of why that happened. I think everybody that's boned up on it knows why that happened, but that's not happening anymore, because now we're getting our intelligence in real time at the location with a real NYPD cop who has a vested interest in keeping the rest of the United States and New York City proper safe. So it's been effective, and it's a program that is sometimes controversial and sometimes causes problems with the federal government and their intelligence agencies. But I'm here to tell you that the effectiveness of an NYPD detective, I'll stand them up against any other law enforcement agency in the country, and I'm sure I'm going to come out on top.
Oh, hell yeah. Especially the feds. Who trusts those guys?
There's a lot I could say, and there's a lot in the book, but I'm not going to say at this point.
No, I hear you, Chris. So you go by Christopher or Chris?
Chris.
Chris? Okay,
Chris.
Yeah. I heard you say you did plainclothes. They don't need those anymore in New York, I heard. The crime is so under control, they're getting rid of plainclothes crime units.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. And the funny thing is, I wrote an article in the paper. This was like right after there was the shootings that spiked in Chicago. And this was back, I think, like maybe 2016, 2017. And there was actually a terrorist attack that had happened in I believe it was Paris. And to make a long story short, there was a huge manhunt looking for this guy named Amari. And lo and behold, he turns up in Italy. He somehow managed to get through the borders. They had rounded up like 3 or 4 other people related to this terrorist attack, a shooting terrorist attack. And a guy believe it or not, on a train station platform saw this guy, noticed that the guy was there on an off hour, that trains weren't coming in and out, and decided to stop the guy. Well, the guy pulls out a pistol from his backpack, shoots one of the cops. The other cop, pulls out his gun and shoots the guy dead. So, hence, the stop, question, and frisk. Like, we had all these major, massive international intelligence organizations looking for this guy, and they couldn't find him. And then here's a cop doing a regular, ordinary stop, question, and frisk, having the wherewithal to say, there's something not right with this guy. Why is he not getting on the train? The train's not coming here, for another couple hours. It was early in the morning, like 2 or 3 in the morning or whatever it was. I can't remember exactly. And, that just showed the dichotomy between the two. It's effective. It's not effective. This argument, plain clothes, street clothes, all kinds of electronic surveillance and, iris scans and, biometrics and a patrolman in Italy on a subway platform or a train platform manages to find this guy that nobody else could find.
That's great. I'm sure he's not a patrolman anymore.
I would think not. I would think not.
No, that's, when I was on the job, they sent us, after 5 years, my agency would send people to this course called Polish the Badge. And I think they kind of think like, patrol guys after 5 years, maybe they need a little like boost, kind of like a little bit of a, like you're important too type thing or whatever. Right. And it is it was a good class. And it was a good reminder. It was by a retired chief from, I want to say Hartford, Connecticut. And he just went over how important patrol is, the whole department, like the backbone of most departments. It's where so much of the stuff comes from for your city or town, where all the drug cases and the stops and informants and
absolutely.
They said, don't get bored or get down on yourself and think you guys are doing the work. That's right. Patrol is super important. But the group you belonged to was called the Phoenix Team, which is like, that is so clandestine sounding.
Yeah. Well, it was one of those things where they were getting, unfortunately, the kids, I call them kids. They're not kids, but they're young men. I think kids by comparison to my age. I love these guys, the soldiers. They developed this strategy because basically what was going on prior to the surge was they were spending billions of dollars on what they call defeat the device. So, if you can imagine, every military contractor is trying to sell them this Gucci crap that's supposedly going to find the bombs out of thin air. And it's not working. And kids are still getting killed. The soldiers are still getting killed. And they've said, why don't we shift gears and maybe do it and do what we call defeat the network as opposed to defeat the device. And if we could defeat the network, we'll probably, as a byproduct, defeat the device. And that's exactly how this program came to be. But when I initially signed up for the program, I was just going to be an advisor at a battalion level or maybe a brigade level to some colonel, and basically attack the problem in Iraq as if it was like a criminal organization, which it really is a criminal organization. Who knew? And I'm in this training and I'm doing the orientation, and I'm with about 30 some other guys, and I get called into the office by the program manager, and he says, I need to talk to you. And there was two other gentlemen that were there with me, and he says, hey, we got this program, and he kind of described it to me, and he goes, and you'll be doing operations and combat missions with real soldiers, and you'll be like at the tip of the spear. And I'm like, he's like, are you interested? And I'm like, oh, I'm in.
Really?
I'm so in. Oh yeah. I said, listen, I have to run it by my wife. And then they're like, well, you really can't talk about the mission. I said, well, I have to explain to her that my job has changed somewhat. I mean, I'm married to this woman at this point,
Right.
15 years. So, I mean, it's not like I'm not going to have a conversation with her, but that's kind of like how that all happened. And then, we get in country with this team, and I have to be honest with you. Some of the things on the first iteration, because there were several, I was there just over 15 months. And the first guy that was kind of running the team and some of the people that were associated with it, there was a lot of problems. And I was like, man, I don't know if I really want to stay here for a year, because we weren't being utilized. And the guy that was managing the team really was very poor at it. And then the second group came in after about 7 months. And then before you knew it, we were running around like chickens with our head cut off. We had so much work, we couldn't even keep up with it.
So Christopher, sorry to interrupt you, but
sure.
just for people listening, is this, so your intelligence works with the NYPD directly translated to working in Iraq? Were you with like translators and all that? Do you speak Iraqi?
Oh yeah. The team was composed of several people, each with their own skill set. Mine was interrogation, or interview and interrogation. I had to have an interpreter. I didn't speak Arabic, but we had other people that were very vital to the team. We had intelligence officers. We had also technical exploitation officers, people that basically rip your phone and do all the kinds of things that you would see in some of these Tom Clancy movies.
Wow.
We had canine people, canine handlers and dogs for basically EOD bomb defense. And then we had an EOD technician in case we came across the device. And we came across quite a few devices as a course of doing some of these combat missions. So, but yeah, to answer your question more generally, the whole team were basically retired special forces people, with the exception of myself. I was like the law enforcement guy, although I did serve 4 years in the Marine Corps. And the people that we supported were all active duty Army. So if you can imagine us wearing identical uniforms, getting on identical MRAPs and RG-33s vehicles and Humvees and things like that, and rolling out on a mission at 3 o'clock in the morning, that's exactly what we did. And if we identified a target, we assaulted the house, they breached the door, shotgunned the door off if necessary, made entry. And then once we got inside, my job, my primary focus was to identify, or I should say positively identify the target. And if people aren't familiar with Iraq, they usually sleep with their whole family. So you would have a husband and a wife and the daughters and maybe an uncle and a couple of sons. So, you could rule out the women, generally speaking, right away if the target wasn't a woman, which most of the time it wasn't. But other times, you're looking for the guy, and it's like, well, you got a targeting package, and it's a silhouette like what you see on TV. There's no face, there's no name, it's a nickname. It's
oh, geez.
And there's some general information about the guy, and maybe some other things that I'm not really going to get into. But once that was done, then I would go to work and I would talk to this guy in a language that maybe he wasn't comfortable with, and I would explain to him that your situation is pretty desperate and I need your cooperation. And hopefully most times I was able to generate voluntary compliance. And if I couldn't, then because the people that were not in the bathroom with me while this interrogation was going on, they were searching the house and they were finding physical evidence that basically directly linked this person to the insurgency. So whereas
where were you getting your authority from? Were you with Iraqi police?
No, we were with the Army.
Just with the Army?
Toward the end, we were working, doing joint operations with the Iraqi military. But the Iraqi police was probably one of the most corrupt organizations while I was there. And they were not someone you really wanted to bring out on a target with you, because they weren't trustworthy. And quite honestly, we raided over, I don't know how many Iraqi police stations, at least 3 that I can remember off the top of my head. And
wow.
None of them worked out well. And every time we found joy, meaning we found a bad guy amongst the midst, and the commanding officers on down the road, just corrupt people. They're there with their hand out to take the American dollar. They have no problem doing that. They're very good at doing that. But as far as keeping their own population safe and killing soldiers, they're better off. They're better at killing American soldiers and coalition forces than they are protecting the Iraqi people.
Wow. Okay. So definitely not the Iraqi police.
No, not at all.
Yeah, this is all very foreign to me, and I just want to make sure it's clear for the listener too.
Sure, absolutely.
So you would get this guy, and imagine there's adds a whole level of stress to him, where it's Americans, and then they have you come in with a translator, and kind of they must think you must be very, very important, very high up there, and kind of scary. Like the things you're saying you can make happen.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a psychological phenomenon that's known as capture shock. And, usually I usually associate it with like a car accident where, there's an impact and you're kind of like dazed and you don't know what's going on. And now you have somebody screaming in your head, and they're asking for information. And I didn't always scream, but I'm just trying to paint a picture for your audience. And the fear and the adrenaline on both sides is very real. And your focus, like I said, is to identify the person. Who is this guy? And the challenge now is, okay, now that I know who you are, and now that it's obvious that you are building bombs and you're killing American soldiers, tell me about the other people in your organization. And so as a result of that, and the Phoenix team, the success of that, I've gone to as many as 4 different targets in one night. So in other words, we'd start an operation at say like maybe 10, 11 o'clock at night, get positive ID by midnight, depending on how the proximity of the target was in relation to where we were, and gone to 3 other additional targets and had joy at each target. So prior to that, positive ID and basically closing down the cell. In other words,
like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Basically, jackpot, joy, happiness, there's another bad guy being taken off the battlefield.
That's great.
But prior to that, the Army, and I'm not knocking the Army because, you're expecting a 19-year-old kid to be able to do what, I've been basically doing for over 20 some odd years, both through interrogation and knowing how to, close the loop, so to speak. So the Army's biggest challenge now, if you can imagine, is they have a 19 or a 20-year-old kid, soldier, and he's trying to do an interrogation. He's got the same flimsy target package that I probably had, if not better or worse.
Right.
And he's trying to work his magic on a guy that's maybe 35, 40 years old. So problem number 1 is his age and his lack of experience. That's not his fault. Problem number 2 is the cultural insensitivity, whereas he's 19 and now the bad guy that you're talking to is 30, 35 years of age. And that is very disrespectful in the Arab culture. They don't like that. So and again, not the soldier's fault. So let's just say the soldier can actually positively identify this person. He goes to the sergeant tells the lieutenant, and now the question becomes, how sure are you that this is the guy? And, depending on the soldier's experience and depending on the level of confidence that the sergeant and the first lieutenant have in this guy, will determine whether or not they're even going to take this person away off the battlefield. But one thing is for certain, if they're able to, and this is prior to the Phoenix team, if in that scenario, if the soldier is able to positively identify somebody and satisfy the sergeant and the lieutenant, that's where it ends. They're just going to cuff him up and they're going to go back to wherever it is, whatever base that they're attached to. The Phoenix team, on the other hand, that's just where it began. I can't even tell you the mountains of evidence, forensic evidence, digital information, documents, certainly IED components that we basically recovered from these houses, from these buildings as we're rolling up these people, and the amount of information that was being funneled into the Army intelligence services. I mean, it was mind blowing. And you would get back at say 6 o'clock in the morning. Now you have to understand, I'm 48 years old, and I think I'm in pretty good shape, and I like to take care of myself, but everybody gets tired.
Sure.
So now you're back there looking at your notes, and you've interrogated or spoken to or interviewed 4 or 5 people, and now you're trying to correlate who said what from your notes, the pictures of the people that you spoke to, put it in a report, and when that's all done, now process the bags of evidence, and there's a lot of stuff. And while we're on the subject of evidence, one of the more interesting things that we were collecting was tens of thousands of dollars in U.S. currency in $100 bills in serial number order. So now, not only is this guy a bad guy, but somebody's paying him. So I'll just let your imagination and let you chew on that for a minute. You can imagine who's paying him. But one thing's certain on this level, he's not stealing the money.
Right.
So it really now goes to the heart of who's giving them this money, the judgment. And now I'm writing my interrogation report. And again, I'm a finder of fact. I don't write what I think this guy wanted to tell me versus what he actually did tell me. So that causes problems. And people are trying to understand, how did this money get there? Because it's traceable. Let's face it. If you and I are both commanding officers of different Army units, and I get lot number 1 through 10 and you get 11 through 20, they're going to know who gave them this money. Similarly, if it's a U.S. intelligence organization, they're going to know. But the problem is they don't want to know, because now it looks like you directly, meaning whoever gave the money notionally to one of these terrorists, your judgment is flawed and you're not getting promoted. In fact, maybe you should be demoted and rotated back to the States.
Right.
It's a problem.
Well,
it's a real problem.
That's the nightmare that people you think might be happening, but you don't want, like you said, I don't think we want to even know about that. It's like,
no.
Chris, I have to ask you, when you, on a typical target, you capture and you interrogate, and you made such a good point about how young these Army guys are, in Marines and everybody else. I've seen them in public once in a while, and I'm like, wow, because I'm 40 myself, and I look at them and I'm like, geez, did I look like that when I was 18? They just look so young kids. Yeah. So they're lucky to have you. I can see why they made this program. It just makes sense. You when you want a job done, you get people who do the job, who've done the job. But so the typical target, is he spilling the beans, or is he, I'm picturing the heat lamp and him sweating on his brow and you slamming your fist down, he's not cracking, or is he just kind of screw it, I'm telling this guy everything?
It's really a combination of all those things. Some people, you get in there and they're so amped up. They're like, I didn't do anything. What do you want to know? And blah, blah, blah. And, I just got here. They're a traveler, or they don't live in the house, all kinds of craziness. And then, like I say, you would tie physical evidence to them. And then you get hardcore Al-Qaeda fighters, or Jaish al-Mahdi, what they call Jaish al-Mahdi, cell members, where they've had formal resistance training. And you're not, all the magic that I'm pulling out of my bag of tricks is not working, and it's terribly frustrating. And to be honest with you, there were a lot of times where I felt like throwing a garbage can down the driveway. I couldn't beat this guy, and they're smiling and they're laughing. But there were a couple times where that was going on, and in one particular incident, this guy was in actually the deck of cards, and I have to be honest with you, it wasn't a target that we had identified. It was actually an Army patrol unit. And it's a long story. I don't want to make it a long story, but this young kid who's driving the first sergeant on a day op turns around and says to the first sergeant, I think that's so-and-so in the deck of cards. So now you're driving down an Iraqi street and you're 8 vehicles deep. You can't just stop on a dime and get out of your car. First of all, the doors are pneumatically actuated. So like the ability to even get out of the car in a timely fashion and then get into a foot chase with 75, 80 pounds worth of crap on you, chasing some kid is very hard to accomplish. So again, not to make a long story short, this guy drives around the block. He convinces, thankfully, the first sergeant he is certain in his mind that this is the person who he is described from the deck of cards. And lo and behold, they call us to come out there, and I'm trying to do my magic with an interrogation, and I'm failing miserably. And this guy's smiling. And at one point, he just says, is this going to take long? Because I have to get back to my business. And I tell you, I literally picked up a chair and threw it over his head against the wall. I had lost it to the point where my teammates had to rescue me. And my intent wasn't to hurt him. My intent was to, break him and move him and shock him. And he just sat there and smiled. And then all of a sudden, as if God himself had intervened in this whole operation, one of my teammates starts yelling from a bedroom, Chris. So I go back inside the house and I go and see, and he hands me a gigantic bag full of IED plug and play detonators for an EFP.
Whoa. That
were cell phone actuated. And I walk over to him and I drop it at his feet and I whisper in his ear and I said, I don't think you're going back to work today. I just have a feeling. And his whole body language, and he just completely collapsed. But again, I had failed. The team had succeeded. We won as a team because these guys, where I was done. I had, gone through all my techniques. None of it was working. The guy was laughing at me. I was getting frustrated. And the other teams remained focused. And thank God they did. And they found these explosive devices. And he was born on the biggest bomb maker in southern Baghdad. And the only reason why it happened was because this kid, from his memory, not even from having the card on the dashboard, so to speak, of his Humvee, said, I'm sure that this is the guy. This is definitely the guy. But had that not happened, I wouldn't be sharing the story with you. So I'm not taking credit really for it, because had they not found, if the soldier had not identified him, or they hadn't found the physical evidence to tie him to being the bomb maker, none of that was happening.
Wow. That's impressive, man. That's especially they all usually have the same head garb on and all that stuff, beards, whatever. I mean, it's very hard. So this guy, the pro, like when you get a pro, like a terrorist, like who's been in the game or has received some training, they must know that, like, all right, this is an American operation. They're not going to pull my hand out and cut my arm off at the elbow. Like they're not gonna do to me what a rival group in this area would do to me. They don't roll that way. So he feels comfortable kind of being a little bit ballsy with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, and it's very challenging. There was, first of all, anything I did was basically verbal. There's none of this, I know people are like, oh, come on. Didn't you smack the guys around and hang them by their toenails? Like, no, that, it was all psychological manipulation and verbal, interviews and interrogation. Had nothing to do with that. But you get yourself in a situation and you're like, this person in front of me is definitely a bomb maker. It's not an accident, the things I'm finding in the house. And again, as I said, earlier, the job for the team was not just to take one and be happy. The job was to close the cell. And just like in the States, if you have a bad guy in a criminal organization and you do a search warrant, before you even get back to the precinct or whatever the arrangement is in that particular department, the rest of the people have already, through the grapevine, know that they arrested Johnny Jones and we need to leave. And that's exactly what's going on in Iraq too. So these people that were part of the cell, they would flee to the four corners of the earth. A lot of times they went straight to Sadr City, which was basically a sanctuary city in Iraq that Army and coalition forces could not action targets in Sadr City, period.
Wow. Yeah, well, that makes sense. Like the telephone game is gonna happen and people are gonna start running. Chris, I have to ask you: is there any point, like, especially after you catch a guy like this big bomb maker. Was there any point when you went home that night, lay your head on the pillow, and you're like, "What the hell am I doing over here? This is crazy." I mean, this is it's nuts.
I just don't know how to explain it to you or your audience. If this is something that you like, if you like chasing the bad guy, this is like chasing the bad guy on steroids. It really is. And whatever it is that you like to do in life, could be, some people like to water ski or ride motorcycles, or, whatever it is that gives you that thing, that adrenaline rush. That's what this gave me. So, like some people would say, oh, like their job, depending on the job, what it is, the alarm clock goes off. Maybe I'll hit the snooze. Like we didn't have an alarm clock. Basically, we were like firemen on standby. And if they identified a target, we rolled. And most times we could be there in less than an hour, meaning like, suited up, geared up, and be at the specific location within an hour. So it's very, very exciting. But to answer your question, I loved it. I mean, I know the guys on the team loved it. And honestly, just so your audience knows, the soldiers that we work with, one of the teams that we supported primarily in 4th ID in Iraq was this team called 122 TST, which stands for Tactical Strike Team. And the guy that led the team was a guy that's right out of Central Casting from the Army. His name was Sergeant Dave Peluso. I'm still very close to him to this day. And the guy that ran our team was this retired Special Forces guy by the name of Adoni Paletica. And basically what was happening was, to put it in an analogy form, a cop gets involved in maybe a car chase, and then the car is disabled, and there's a subsequent foot chase, and there's a physical confrontation. The guy's caught, the gun is recovered, the car is recovered, whatever. We're coming back with these soldiers from the 122 TST, Sergeant Dave's team, and they're very popular now on the base because they're like, hey man, you guys are rolling, because it's like a grapevine there for them too. It's like, and the satisfaction for me to see that kind of acknowledgement from, because I'm looking at it from an older person's perspective, almost like a teacher with a student, you know what I mean? And now the student it's just, they're loving the course. And now these guys are, they're highly popular with the opposite sex on the base. So if you're a guy, you're popular. If you're a girl, you're popular. And good on for that. And I'm happy for that because again, the energy of being around young people and their enthusiasm is very, very contagious. And so I made that a long story, but it was so much fun. It was something that I think everybody enjoyed, that everybody was like, man, let's suit up tonight. Who are we going to get tonight? You know what I mean? So it was exciting and it was fun. So
sounds like it, man. Sounds amazing. And how many years did you do it, or how many months?
I did it for 15 months.
And what year was it?
This was from 2008, February 2008 to May of 2009. Okay. So I was with the same team, but like I said, the team had gone through a couple of iterations, but the second team that came in stayed there, the principal players and the leadership. And once that happened, it was man, oh man, it was exciting. It was fun, a lot of fun.
So after 15 months, did you just kind of feel like, okay, you're married, you got a family. Were you just kind of like, all right, I gotta go home. I've had enough.
Well, yes and no. What happened was, and I don't want to get political, but there was a new president elected, and Obama came in, and basically what they did was they re-signed what they call the Status of Forces Agreement, and it changed the whole dynamic of the team. So that took effect, almost immediately after he got sworn into office. So now the dynamics of how we could conduct operations, the legal hurdles, everybody loves a lawyer. The Army loves a lawyer. The oversight and things like that, it changed. So we went from doing, a mission every day, sometimes more than one mission a day, to we were struggling to get out the gate once a week. And so, again, they call it mission creep. They call it a lot of other things too. And so that was kind of disheartening because what was once an amazing team and familiarity and things like that, now that changed. And by the way, the team that we were really tied to, Sergeant Dave's team, their 15-month commitment didn't coincide with ours, so they were rotating back. So now we're having to work with a totally different team. They're skeptical of us. They don't know how well the team is because they just got in country, and it's a whole, winning them over process all over again. So by the time that happened in February, now we had March, April, May, it was never the same. So for my decision to stay would have been easy had we remained with the same, key players and the same team and things like that. But then once that changed and they asked me if I wanted to renew, I'm like, can't do it. Been here long enough. And I had young kids at the time. So, and it was probably a good idea because, you start to get a little bit complacent. You're not as sharp as you were. And, my age was probably playing a factor. And, it was probably time. It was time.
I gotcha. So when you guys would go out in these teams, were you generally, you say you get kind of complacent over time, which happens to everybody. Were you initially feeling like on edge, or were you feeling pretty safe traveling in? Like, I can't imagine traveling in Iraq. I mean, I suppose you're with the U.S. Army, but you're going to remote areas, you're going to houses and stuff. Did you feel safe, or did you feel like you could be, ambushed?
Well, here's the thing. Our drivers, we had drivers that were assigned to us. So again, we're going out in identical vehicles. We're wearing identical uniforms, identical weaponry. The only thing that you could tell is different, obviously, is our face because we're older. And so in terms of a security element and good drivers and sharp drivers and things like that, that wasn't the fear. The reality in Iraq is pretty much once the surge started, soldiers weren't being picked off by small arms fire. They were being killed primarily by IEDs and EFPs, explosively formed projectiles. Some people call it explosive formed penetrator, whatever it is. It's a bomb that's designed to come through the one side of an MRAP and out the other, and then it just basically kills everybody inside. So that was actually getting from point A to B and from point B back to point A is far and away the most dangerous part of the operation. Yes, there is potential that you could be blown up by going into a house. They could self-detonate, suicide vests, things like that. But that part didn't worry me. What really worried me was now we're working with soldiers that don't have the same kind of enthusiasm and the same kind of desire as Sergeant Dave's team. So now the problem becomes, are these guys going to accept us and learn from us, or are they just going to take a wait-and-see attitude? And so that was a little bit unsettling because instead of being with the same team probably 80% of the time, now we're with a different team. And now are they going to be switched on, so to speak? Are they going to be engaged? And to be honest with you, some of them were, but the amount of operations and the operation tempo, I think, is what changed the whole dynamic of the team. I mean, it's not good to be sitting around in Iraq. You're there to do a job. And, I like to work. The people on the team were amazing. That supported me, that did a phenomenal job, made me look like a superstar. But when you're sitting around and, trying to, how many times can you go to the gym? How much coffee can you get from the green bean coffee shed? It's not good. So like when the 15 months was over and they asked me if I wanted to extend, I said no. And then what happened was they actually shut down the mission altogether because the whole dynamic of how they were going to enforce law and prosecute targets in Iraq, they just went from great to like it was in the toilet. It was miserable. The amount of thresholds you had to meet between their criminal justice system and the Army's way of doing business with their legal system, it was just a mess.
That's a shame. That's too bad. It seems like in every line of work like that, politics gets involved, and this ruins what people are doing, the effective things that you guys are doing. Let me ask you this. I don't know if you could answer it or not. And maybe this is just my Hollywood mind, but did you ever capture anybody that claimed they were already working with the U.S. government? Maybe the CIA, or hey, I already have I have a handler. This is who it is.
Oh yeah.
And were they lying, or was it true?
No, they weren't lying.
Wow.
Listen. Terribly frustrating. Yes. The short answer is yes. And even worse than that, I'll give you an example. And I'm just going to speak in generalities. Say we went out and executed a target, and say the person that we arrested or captured was a target that was previously identified by a legitimate special forces unit and was identified 6 months prior. Now, imagine now I'm bringing this person back to the base, and now the Black Hawk helicopter flies in, and these guys get out with all their Gucci gear and their beards and their Oakley sunglasses, and they say, "Hey, can you tell me where the detention facility is?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. It's, right down the street. You'll see the sign. There's a big red sign, white lettering." "Oh, okay, thanks." And their whole purpose there was to go to the detention facility and take the target that we just previously brought off the battlefield.
No.
Yeah. So now, so just, again, we're speaking in generality. So now just imagine you're the commanding officer of this special forces group, and the colonel of that group wants to know how a bunch of banged up 40-year-old men are running around in this battle space, picking up targets that you had previously, meaning the special forces community and JSOC, have previously identified. How is that possible? Why is that happening? And so it's uncomfortable. Now, did we do that intentionally? No. Was there deconfliction? I know for a fact that the guy that ran our intel shop, this guy, Matt Pacino, was a super sharp guy, and he was a special forces operator. I'm sure he did do deconfliction, but I'm sure that again, this is a general notional story. I'm sure the people on the other side in the real special forces community decided that they weren't going to tell him. So
wonderful.
That's on them. That's not on me. Okay.
Yeah.
Other people that we arrested were directly tied to the Ministry of National Security and Affairs, a group called Mensa, an organization that was set up by the CIA that didn't even exist before we got in country. So I'm arresting people from this cell, bona fide, card-carrying members of the Mensa organization, killers, financiers. And now all of a sudden we're deciding through this one interrogation that I had done that the guy gives up basically, it's not a safe house, but it was like an auxiliary or a nondescript building where they were working out of, meaning the Mensa group. And it's a long story, but to make the story shorter, we were going to do a raid, and we planned it for 30 days. There was multiple briefings. The Army loves to give a briefing. Our team was giving a briefing. The guy that was running the team at the time, he loved to hear himself talk too. And next thing you know, they're canceling the mission. Now, I don't know why they canceled the mission. I think your audience could probably, guess why they canceled the mission. But if you're an intelligence organization and you're funding a terrorist organization that's under the legitimate auspices of the so-called Iraqi government, and those people in turn are not only killing soldiers, but killing and displacing Sunnis because now it's a Shiite-controlled country, that's probably not good. That's probably not how taxpayers want to see their money spent. And that creates a lot of problems. But again, am I the internal affairs of the Army or the CIA or other intelligence organizations that are in Iraq? Clearly, I'm not. I'm just Chris Strom from the NYPD. But somebody should care more about these soldiers than me. And believe me, I love the soldier. There's not anything I wouldn't do for these kids to help them, to keep them safe. And I like to think they felt the same way about our team because we were really, really close. But apparently people in positions of power and leadership, they think that just throwing money around is the answer to all problems. And it's not. It ends up causing more problems.
Man, that is, I kind of had an inkling that could be like that, but man, that is frustrating. All that together, you must have been ready to get on a plane and been like, all right, I'm done.
I was, but it's like anything else in life. If you did your best, that's all you can do. You know what I mean? I wasn't there to change the world, but I will tell you that the team was so effective that we had 2 consecutive 30-day periods without a single event. No IEDs, no soldiers injured or killed, no bombs going off. And, people could say, oh, well, that's just luck. You could say it's just luck if it was happening theater-wide, but it wasn't. It was happening only in our battle space area. And we kicked the crap out of these people. And they knew it. They knew when we came, it's just like, pick a major city, and I'll just use New York. You got an effective anti-crime team, or you flood a team with like a robbery task force unit or a street crime unit. Those people are leaving town. It's not to say that they're out of commission and they're never going to cause problems somewhere else. But for where you are, where you've concentrated and directed, your resources, they're not going to be there for a while. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. There's little cities outside of LA here that, have reputations for having kind of a bunch of ass kickers for the police department. Not a big department, but ass kickers. And there's no gangsters there. They left. They're elsewhere. That's just kind of, I mean, geez, Chris. So what's wrong with having a group like that running around? I mean, it was all political that the reins changed hands and a different philosophy came in and they put too much red tape in front of you, and then that's it. It's just not happening anymore.
Yeah, well, I can tell you this. The counterinsurgency program, it was actually a concept when this all started. They didn't know if it was going to work. It hadn't been tried before. I mean, it's only been done in traditional law enforcement for 150 years. So, the Army is slow to change. They have a way of doing things, and it could be any military. I don't want to speak in generalities, but I'm just going to speak about the Army because that's what I know and that's what I saw. This training, this program was so effective. I got a text message from I'm not going to say the person's name, who is now running an intelligence department within the Army, and it's now part of their standard training doctrine. That's how effective this methodology was. And again, did I invent how to do police work? Clearly, I didn't invent how to do police work. They had all the elements there, but the genius of the team was really just that. The members of the team, the commitment, the years of experience. I mean, you can't teach that in a classroom. You have to go out and you have to have a lot of failure before you have success. And believe me, I had a lot of failure too. I'm not going to sit there and tell you or your audience, oh yeah, every time I went out there, I'm hitting 90% and, getting 90%. It's just not realistic. And it's a lie. But when you have, like I said, the one time we were out there and you have a team supporting you, even when you fail, the team seems to succeed. And that's what really made it so effective.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'm thinking maybe who could play you? Maybe like Tommy Lee Jones. He's probably Tommy Lee Jones. I'm thinking of him in U.S. Marshals. He's probably like 90 now.
Yeah.
I haven't seen him forever.
I don't know.
Chris, that is so cool. Now let me take us back a little bit. Usually I ask some cop story questions, and you just gave us a whole front load of amazing counterinsurgency cop stories. Can we go way back to when Officer Strom was just on the job and went to his first hot call, like the first call that got your blood going?
It's too funny, I there's so many stories, and this is back in 1987, so I'm dating myself. But I remember getting into Brooklyn and Coney Island, and in New York, when you're a rookie, you walk a foot post. People think, oh, you just automatically get in a car. Everybody's in a car. No, not everybody's in a car, and so you go through your field training, and usually like once a week you got to ride with the sergeant. At the time, they had sergeants doing the field training, and I'll never forget. I'm in the car with this guy, Sergeant Billy Smith, and he's driving. You don't even get to drive because, you're in Brooklyn and it's Coney Island. There's a lot of traffic and nobody wants to fill out an accident report and take the car out of service. And all of a sudden, for some reason, he saw something in this car or the way these guys looked inside this car, and he decides to follow this car, and the car takes off. And the next thing you know, we're driving down these streets, and the car goes into a parking lot, and the guys get out and bail out of the car, and they abandon the car. Well, we end up catching the driver. So it's me, Sergeant Billy Smith, and I think we had at the time 2 other rookies in the car. I just happened to be in the front right passenger seat, again, not driving. And we grabbed this guy, but the other guy runs, and now, your natural instinct is, you want to catch this guy. So I'm with Billy, and I'm holding this guy down, and we're trying to get handcuffs on him. And I was in the summertime, and the other 2 guys are starting to run after this other guy. Well, we're right where we are geographically is right next to the Bell Parkway, which may or may not mean anything to people in your audience, but it's probably one of the most dangerous and busy parkways in New York City. And it's 6 lanes, 3 one way, 3 another way. Oof. And this guy jumps over a fence and literally runs across. And it's almost like God himself had an umbrella around him. Cars screeching, smashing into each other. This guy makes it across 6 lanes of traffic, and we're all just kind of looking like, well, at least we got the driver. So, it's like, it's not a total loss, you know what I mean? But It was one of those things where like, holy, it's like, and I, again, I'm a rookie cop and I'm seeing this and I'm like, that's pretty desperate to get away. But, sanity prevailed and the other guys thankfully didn't run after him, but they were thinking about it and I was thinking about it too. But it was just one of those things. So that's probably one of my first experiences as a New York City police officer.
That's awesome. You must have thought after the call, like, this is awesome.
Oh my God. Yeah. Listen, I got to live out my fantasies. I really, honestly got the NYPD, all the things that you see in a movie. People may think, oh, that's exaggerated. It's not done. I mean, it really is. It's an amazing experience. A lot of fun guys and girls. And if you like chasing the bad guy, which I loved, that's where, for me, that's where it was. It was so much fun. I loved it. That's awesome, man.
Can you describe a strange or bizarre call that you dealt with?
Well, there's a lot of weird things that go on within the NYPD. This one I actually just happened upon. I was in Queens and these two cars were racing around, drag racing, and we get a call over the radio that there's a car accident, not unusual. And so we get to the location and there's a car. And at the time, this car was very popular. It was a Mitsubishi Conquest. So it was like a supercar for its day and age. I think it was like 1990, 91, whatever it was. I'm not exactly sure. And apparently we find out later that this car and another car were drag racing. And in the median, like most medians, there were a couple of trees. Well, this guy lost control, hit a tree, and the car literally split right behind the driver's seat of the car. So one half of the car is down the block and the other half is on the other side of the block.
Oh, he was moving, huh?
Oh my gosh. And it was almost like, like somebody sawed the car in half. Wow. And he's literally behind the steering wheel of the car and the car is still running and he doesn't have a scratch on him. There's not a scratch on. And if you'd seen what the car looked like, you're like, how is that possible? You know what I mean? It's like, and this is in broad daylight and we're like looking at that and we're like, oh my God, so we called an ambulance anyway, just to, get the guy checked out. There wasn't anything obviously wrong with him. Like we didn't see any blood and thank God he was seatbelted in, but it was the craziest thing that was one of the craziest things. There were many, but that was one of the oddest things I think I've ever seen.
Wow. That is nuts. I mean, the car came right apart. The cars now are so safe. Where I used to work, there was like a 4-lane undivided highway that had residences off of it, which this is a bad combination, and we'd go to like crazy rollovers, like roll over multiple times into the woods, and everybody's out of the car. Everybody's fine. Yeah. You're like, holy crap! It's a newer SUV. And my dad was a cop starting in the 70s, and he said, there used to be no seatbelts and metal dashboards. He goes, I go to a car wreck where 4 people were dead in one car.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
The car rolls over. It's like a blender. You're just like,
it's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah.
Wow. That guy was lucky, man. That's crazy.
Yep.
That's awesome. So Chris, can you tell us about one of your more intense or terrifying calls on the NYPD? I know you probably got a lot of them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of one that's really like people can relate to. There was a shooting that had happened, and I was working in a robbery unit in Queens, so I basically had domain over the whole borough of Queens. And again, for your audience, if people don't realize how big the borough of Queens is, it's over 50 square miles. So there's a drive-by shooting, and where the radio is chirping, and I'm at one end of Queens, and the rest of the team, there was like 4 of us that went out. We rolled 4 deep in 4 different cars. And I get the description of this guy, and apparently they know each other. And so we got 2 people shot, including a woman. And the car is being driven by an ex person. They give a description of the guy, and they give a description of the vehicle, but they don't have a license plate. But they say that the guy lives in this one particular location. So rather than drive from where I was, which by the time I got there would have been at least 15 minutes later, we started maneuvering our vehicle to where we thought this guy might live, because we knew we had a name on who this person was. They were known to each other. And apparently he's driving a silver Honda. Well, I don't know what you know about New York City, but a silver Honda is like, And it could be, there's a million silver Hondas,
Right.
there's just, it's probably one of the most common colors for any vehicle. So we're on the block and we're kind of in the general area of where his house is. But of course, we don't want to pull right up on his house. And now a silver Honda drives by and we're like, was that the guy? Was that the guy? Do we want to leave our spot and kind of give away our position? What if it's not the guy and we follow this guy and the real guy comes home in the interim? We don't know. You know what I mean? So we decided to stay. Well, we don't know. We found out later. He must have parked the car around the corner and now he's walking directly head on to us. So we're in the car on the street and his house is, if you can imagine, is behind us like 2 or 3 houses down. And we're watching him as he's approaching. And now we're like, holy crap, it looks like it's the guy. Again, we're not 100% sure of this guy because the general description fits this guy. And one of the descriptors was that he had long dreadlocks, which again, that doesn't really necessarily mean anything. And I was in Jamaica, Queens. A lot of the people in Jamaica, Queens, the men and women, had dreadlocks. So you couldn't go by that.
Right.
And he's walking toward us and we're like little kids are like, holy crap, we better duck down. So now we're literally like diving down underneath the dashboard. My partner's diving down behind the back seat and we wait for this guy to walk past us. And as soon as he gets past us, we're like, it's like 2:00 in the morning. Once you open the door, it's going to be like a movie, like creak and all the sound and the dome lights coming on and everything. So the game plan was, let's get out of the car, like on the count of 3, and we get out. He's probably maybe 25, 30 feet behind us now, walking toward wherever he's going. And we get out and we get in a triangle formation and we identify ourselves. We're in plain clothes. We say, please don't move. Well, with that, he reaches directly for his waistband. Now, we know that there was a gun used at the shooting. What kind of gun is he going to pull out? We don't even know. And the partner I was with was this guy by the name of Kevin, and he says, Chris, he's reaching for it. And I'm like, I just reacted. I just buffalo tackled him from behind and drove him right into the ground. And in the process of driving him into the ground, he now has his hand on the gun and he throws it to his left side. I'm behind him, but I'm on top of him. And now I'm like, I can't, I don't know. Does he have another gun? Does he not have a gun or whatever? And, eventually we get him handcuffed and my partner at the time was this guy, Kevin. He goes over there and recovers the gun. It's a loaded Glock. And I was like, shoot, don't shoot. Oh, you shot him in the back. Like, I didn't want to wait till he shot me first. You know what I mean? It's like all this stuff is going through your mind, which is now in the public domain. And, the people think, oh, it's just nice and neat. And you can generate voluntary compliance for these people. They do exactly what you tell you. And believe me, you have no idea. This guy knows or reasonably knows that he's going to be arrested. He's aware of the reason why we're there because he actually shot somebody. And so, what's his mode? What's his mental state? What's his level of desperation and to avoid getting arrested? You don't know. All these things are happening in seconds and you're trying to make a decision. And it's one of those things where that stuck with me for a long time. That kind of that gave me a good scare.
Yeah, I bet. Especially when, people are yelling things like he's going for it. You got to use every ounce of control not to shoot him. Yeah.
And now, and you have your gun out now too, because obviously, we're both, drawing down on this guy. And now it's like, I make the decision because I'm like, when my partner Kevin had yelled that, I'm like, I didn't even think of it. I didn't even tell him. I just put my gun back in my holster and gang tackled him because I knew Kevin was going to cover me. But at the same time, it's like, that doesn't happen by accident either. I mean, you got to work with somebody to know that, they're going to react once they see you react and vice versa. So there's got to be some teamwork and element of tactics involved in that. And that doesn't happen overnight either. That comes from years of experience. I mean, I didn't get into this unit until I had over 10 years. So, I mean, so there was a lot of, patrol uniform, and 2 years of anti-crime that kind of, prepared me for this. But, you just don't know how it's going to go. You don't, the why factor is, what is this person going to do? What is he going to do? You know what you're going to do, but you don't know what this person's going to do. Yeah.
That's, especially when you're in plain clothes, right?
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
And it's dark out. So you gotta think too, I hope he saw my badge or he's buying it or whatever, right. Geez, that's so many things to process. Yeah, you're right. People don't put themselves, people have so much empathy for everybody but police, you know. Just take a second and put yourself in that situation. It's pitch black. You're looking for, you know, a shooter, and you have like zero time to make the right decisions. It's like impossible situations like that. And the crazy thing is, you know as much as I do, the things like that are happening in our major cities all the time, and the cops are getting the best outcomes. They're doing their job. It's an impossible job, and they're doing it. And then you know, 1 out of a million, something goes wrong, and that's it. Let's label them all like that. You know, that's the frustration.
Exactly. It's sad. It's unfortunate.
It's nuts. Chris, when you work for the intelligence division, this is going to sound corny, and I just don't know about this stuff. Was there terrorist cells that you guys broke up, or things that looked like that?
Yes.
Like in New York?
Yes.
Wow. Because we just don't, unless you know somebody like you just don't hear too much about it. Probably, you know, they probably don't want to plaster the news with it and make people, you know, freaked out constantly. But so you guys are like foiling stuff like that with that agency, with that division. That's crazy.
Yeah, I got to tell you, again, I got brought into the unit post 9/11, and I had an amazing team. I was surrounded by really gifted, super smart detectives, and they really, honestly, like I said before, they made me look like a superstar. And just so your audience has an idea of how it works, the police don't go out and surveil one group versus another group. The police either come across information because, as you said before, patrol finds something that's a little bit, you know, hinky, and they bring it to the attention of the intelligence division. A lady that's in an apartment building who's 80 years old and knows everybody by first name and knows the comings and goings of everybody, who got a new TV and a new refrigerator, you know, those people make a call, and that's how the intelligence division gets involved. Now, are there other proactive programs within the intelligence division? Clearly, some super clandestine stuff. And I'm just, again, going to speak notionally, where maybe there's a police officer who's never even seen the inside of a police building, who's not even in the state of New York, working in an undercover capacity. So there's a lot of things that go on. Like I said before, if people really understood the amount of work and dedication of people in the NYPD intelligence division, they would fall out of their chair. They just wouldn't believe it. But they only want to hear about there's profiling and you're picking one group versus another. Well, I'm here to tell you, if we don't actually, and I'm going to use the word profiling, then all the analysts in the NYPD and any other law enforcement agency, they should just go home, because we go where the crime stats are. We go with the intelligence that we gather. It's not, if the intelligence said it's a green man that lives in a yellow house, that's where we go.
Right.
It's not for me to determine whether or not he's a good guy, he's a bad guy. The information comes to the police through the ways I just mentioned, and we do an investigation. And if it turns out that the green guy in the yellow house is a nice guy and it's just somebody's paranoia, well, then we move on. But we're not going to move on until we rule him out. So, you know, make no mistake about it. I'm not going to speak about other police departments. I would just tell you, the NYPD does probably more door knocking and more human intelligence collection in one day than most departments do in a year, because they're that serious about it. When you get punched in the face and people that you love are no longer with you anymore because somebody dropped the ball, not once but twice, because it happened in 93, you take it very seriously. So you're not going to ignore the woman who's 80 years old in the apartment building, because some of the best intelligence I've gotten is from an old lady that sits on the steps in Brooklyn that knows exactly what's going on in her neighborhood.
Absolutely. Those I do insurance investigations now, and I've met that lady, and I met her in Compton, and this woman was like this little black lady, and she was more than happy. She sits on her porch all the time. She knows where everybody's cars were parked, where they should be parked, what cars don't belong there. She knows who gets pissed when that person parks in front of their house. And this was for a stolen vehicle, you know, and stolen and destroyed vehicle. And a kind of, a lot of red flags went up. But yeah, she could care. She told me everything. She knew everything. And she was happy to help, and she gave me her phone number and everything.
Yep.
But yeah, you're right. That's smart, finding those people in the neighborhood that have all the info that you could never have.
Exactly.
That's so
exactly.
Cool. So, Chris, one thing that people really value here, some of the younger listeners getting into law enforcement, someone with your kind of credentials, they really want to hear you give some advice for them, for new officers getting into the police field.
Right now it's tough. I mean, if I'm to be honest, it's a career that I was very blessed to have. I loved it. No 2 days are the same. You get a good partner. I mean, it's a load of fun. I mean, every day is a challenge, and you have to use your mind and think, and you have to react and interact with a lot of people, and it takes you out of your comfort zone. And, I know this because you're involved in law enforcement, but probably 90% of the day is very boring, especially on patrol. I know we were talking earlier about the guys on patrol, the backbone of policing, the people that see everything. And, they get stuck with some of the more mundane things. But every now and then there's a little sprinkle of excitement that's just enough to keep you interested in the game. So I think it's a great profession. Unfortunately, now it's not because of what's going on, and I think it's more politically driven. And hopefully after the election, it's going to change. But this whole business of defunding the police and police systemic racism, those people make me want to throw up. They're just so boring, and it's so canned, and it's so responsive to what the polls say. It's nonsense. The thing for me is it's still a great job. It's an exciting job. Doesn't pay a whole lot. It depending on the department and the size of the department, and that has a lot to do with it too. If you're going to join a police department, I would suggest going to a bigger police department versus a small department. And the reason why I say that is because I was at a small department in Plano, Texas for 2 years, and the guys and girls there were great. But the lateral movement into specialty units was near impossible because it's just so small and the turnover is so low. So, that's one of the things I would say if you're going to take it, go to a major city. I don't care if it's New York. I mean, I'm partial, obviously, toward New York City. I still think it's the greatest city in the world, although there's clearly a lot of problems going on there. But, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Miami, all these sheriff's department in Florida. I mean, there's some great departments in California. I'm really not that familiar with. I know the Los Angeles guys and gals are great out there, but I would suggest if they're going to make that kind of a career move, that it's a bigger department versus a smaller one, because I think your opportunity is better for career path movement. That's what I would suggest.
Excellent. Great advice, Chris. And, you got a book, Brooklyn to Baghdad. You touched on some of what went on when you were overseas. I mean, we probably just scratched the surface, but they can get it all with this book. Where can people pick it up?
It's on Amazon.com under Brooklyn to Baghdad. It's at Barnes and Noble. Walmart has it. I had a buddy of mine. He actually saw it in the library and sent me a picture of it.
Oh, that's awesome! That's so cool.
So it's almost like when you finally, I guess, like a music artist, you finally get to hear your song being played on the radio. Like I feel like I have some monicum of success at this point.
That's badass. That's cool.
Yeah. If they Google my name, Christopher Strom, Strom, all kinds of information pops up. I'm on Facebook. If people want to direct message me about information about the book or getting a signed copy, I'm happy to, accommodate people any way I can. I have a Twitter account and I have a Instagram, and it's pretty much all driven toward the book signings and things like that. That's pretty much the extent of it. I'm kind of technically challenged. So if you email me, I'm good. If you do a direct message, I may have to include my son or daughter to help me figure out how to operate that. So.
Got it. That's awesome, man. Hey, Chris, this is episode number 63, and I can tell you positively I found joy interviewing you.
Awesome. I'm glad, Steve.
That was
Thank
great,
you.
man. And I'm gonna link Chris's where you can find him and his links to his books in the show notes. It'll also be on the website and our Facebook page. So Christopher Strom, NYPD, retired sergeant from the Intelligence Division. Thank you so much for coming on, brother.
Thanks a million, Steve, for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, take care. I'm gonna run the bumper. Just hang on the line.
Okay.